I'm Natalie Chen, 29, and I built a life I'm proud of, starting from a modest nonprofit job to co-owning a home I never thought I'd afford. For years, I supported my family without question. I showed up, smoothed over conflict, played the responsible one. But when they mocked the man I love, right to his face, at my own father's birthday dinner, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by the very people you stood by for years? If so, share your story in the comments, because trust me, you're not the only one. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to cut ties or set boundaries just to protect your peace, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about reclaiming your voice and choosing yourself. What happened next still surprises me. I'm 29 now, but this story really starts back in my childhood, long before I understood how families could function on judgment instead of love. My parents were never cruel, not in the way that shows up in dramatic memoirs or therapy sessions. They were just sharp and exacting. Everything in our house had a place, including emotions. My father was a corporate litigator. My mother ran a boutique real estate firm and liked to remind people she built it from the ground up. On paper, we were a model family. 3 kids, 2 successful parents, a house with clean lines and imported furniture that we weren't allowed to sit on without coasters or caution. I was the oldest. That meant I carried things. Not just backpacks or laundry loads or science fair displays, but expectations. Unspoken but constant. I helped with homework, made dinner when mom worked late, and stepped in when my younger brother and sister fought over TV remotes or bedtime stories. I didn't mind, not really. It just became the rhythm of things. Dad worked late, mom hosted networking events, and I cleaned up the kitchen while making sure the other 2 brushed their teeth. By middle school, I was fluent in quiet sacrifice. I can't point to one moment where it became clear that my role in the family was to support rather than to shine, but I remember a dozen small ones. Like when I won the regional spelling bee in 7th grade and got a polite clap at dinner, and the next week, when my brother got a B+ in math, we went out for ice cream. Or when I got into the honors program in high school, and my parents just nodded, already pivoting to discuss my sister's dance recital. I kept giving. Time, energy, help, emotional labor, though I didn't know that phrase yet. And in return, I got something close to invisibility. When I left for college, I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was being released from a contract. I studied business administration, worked 2 part-time jobs, and learned how to take up space in rooms where no one handed me permission first. After graduation, I stayed in the city and took a job in operations for a nonprofit. My parents weren't impressed. That kind of salary won't go far in this economy, my dad had said. My mom's only question was, will there be room for growth into something real? What she meant was, something worth mentioning at brunch. I met Eli when I was 25. He worked in commercial construction, small firm, family-run, focused on restoration projects. He wasn't flashy, he didn't wear suits, but he noticed things. The way I held tension in my jaw when I was anxious. That I always chose booths over tables at restaurants. That I memorized coffee orders for everyone in the office but never drank any myself. He was easy to be with in a way I'd never known. There was no performance required, just presence. We dated for almost 6 months before I told my parents about him. Not because I was hiding him, but because I knew what would happen once they learned his name and occupation. Eli didn't have a degree. He didn't talk about market trends or quarterly earnings. He talked about reclaimed wood and outdated plumbing codes. When I finally told my mom, her first question was, does he at least own the company? My dad didn't ask anything at all. He just grunted and turned the page of his newspaper. Still, I brought him to dinner one Sunday. I told Eli it wouldn't be fun, but he wanted to try. They're your family, he said. I should meet them. They greeted him politely. Not warmly, but with that tight, brittle civility my parents reserved for realtors they didn't like but still needed to deal with. My mom smiled too widely. My dad asked about construction like it was a foreign language. My siblings barely acknowledged him, both glued to their phones during the entire meal. At one point, my mother leaned across the table and asked, "So, Eli, what made you decide not to go to college?" Her tone was casual, but I knew that voice. It wasn't curiosity. It was performance. He smiled and said, "I started apprenticing when I was 17. College didn't make financial sense for what I wanted to do." My dad chuckled under his breath and muttered, "Different generation, I guess." We made it through the meal. Barely. When we got in the car afterward, I apologized before he could say anything. "You don't have to explain," he said, adjusting the rearview mirror. "I see it now." After that night, I stopped trying to blend the two parts of my life. I'd go to family events alone. I didn't bring Eli to birthdays or holidays. Not because I was ashamed of him, but because I didn't want to keep throwing him into rooms where he wasn't treated like a human being. My parents never asked about him again, and I never offered. But over time, the tension started to accumulate, because they weren't just dismissing Eli, they were dismissing me. The way they used to when I was a kid, and they forgot I had needs of my own. Looking back, I think part of me always knew how it would go, but I kept hoping they'd surprise me. That maybe, just maybe, they'd see what I saw in him. They never did. But eventually, they saw something else, something they couldn't ignore, and when that moment came, it changed everything. The comments didn't start right away. They crept in gradually, folded into casual conversations that didn't seem like confrontations until you looked at them twice. One afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a birthday gift for my niece. My brother Michael was there, standing in the kitchen drinking a smoothie he didn't offer to share. He glanced at the photo on my phone, Eli and I at a weekend flea market, laughing over something out of frame, and raised his eyebrows. "Does he even own a suit?" he asked. He was smirking, but not in a joking way. The tone landed somewhere between superiority and pity. "He owns two," I said flatly, already regretting the visit. "Just checking," he said. "It's just, family events, weddings. Some of us were raised with standards." That was the first time I realized they weren't just skeptical about Eli, they were quietly mocking him. Not openly. Nothing I could quote or confront. But it was there, under the surface, like a splinter that kept catching. A few weeks later, my mom called. It was a Wednesday night. I was tired from work and folding laundry while she talked. At some point, the conversation drifted toward Eli, though I hadn't brought him up. "You've been with him for, 8 months now?" she said. 9. Well, I just hope you're not settling because you're tired of dating. You've always been practical, Nat, sometimes to a fault. Don't let convenience replace compatibility." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure which part to address, the implication that I was lazy in love, or the assumption that Eli was just a placeholder for something better. "It's not convenience," I finally said. "We're building something together. He's starting a real estate firm with 2 friends. They just finalized the LLC paperwork." "Oh," she said in that clipped tone she used when something bored her. "I thought he was doing construction." "He still is. This is an addition." "Right." She paused. "Well, I hope that works out. That kind of thing is always risky." I could practically hear the unspoken sentence. Some people are better suited to stability. What she really meant was, some people are better suited to dating your daughter. I hung up feeling defensive and exhausted. Eli was putting in 16-hour days. He'd been saving, calculating every purchase, researching properties like it was a second job. But none of that registered to them. To my family, unless you had a title and a polished LinkedIn profile, you weren't serious. The following weekend, I ran into an old friend from high school at a neighborhood cafe. We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on work and mutual acquaintances. Just as we were parting ways, she hesitated. "Hey, this is probably nothing, but your sister asked me something weird the other day. She saw a photo of you and Eli on my feed and asked if he was some kind of phase." I blinked. "A phase?" "Yeah." Like if you were just doing the anti-establishment boyfriend thing for a while. Her words, not mine. I laughed, but it didn't feel funny. Thanks for telling me. I didn't confront my sister. I didn't have the energy to fight a battle that would only lead to eye rolls and claims that I was being too sensitive. But I carried that phrase with me for days, some kind of phase. Like he was a new haircut or a questionable tattoo. At first, I tried to push back. I told my mom about the real estate partnership. I mentioned that Eli was the one who taught me how to patch drywall in my rental unit and helped my friend move a piano on a Sunday afternoon without being asked. I brought up how well he handled stress, how kind he was to strangers. But none of it stuck. They never said anything cruel outright, just small dismissals, the kind you can't quite quote but still feel in your skin. My dad never once asked Eli a direct question about himself, not about his childhood, his business, his goals. When Eli was around, they spoke around him, not to him. Like he was a +1 for a wedding they didn't RSVP to. We were invited to a barbecue at my aunt's house that summer. Eli asked if I wanted to go. I hesitated. The last few family events had drained both of us. The forced small talk, the awkward glances, the way my mother introduced him as Natalie's friend instead of by name. I'm fine either way, he said, but you don't have to protect me from them. I knew what he meant, and I knew he wasn't asking for reassurance, just clarity. We didn't go to the barbecue. After that, I started making excuses. I'd stop by family gatherings for an hour on my own. I'd say Eli had to work or wasn't feeling well. No one asked follow-up questions. That was the other part of it, the refusal to show interest. As if Eli's presence in my life didn't merit curiosity, only quiet judgment. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that our relationship didn't need their approval. But it wore on me. There was a growing tension between the life I was building and the one they still expected me to live. It all came to a head the night my cousin announced her engagement. The family threw a celebration dinner. Eli didn't come, I didn't ask him to. I wore a navy dress, brought wine, and smiled through the usual comments. At one point during dinner, my aunt leaned in and said, "So, Natalie, any updates on your guy? Still hammering nails?" It wasn't malicious, just casual condescension served with roasted chicken and a glass of Pinot Noir. "Actually," I said, "he just closed on a duplex with his business partners. They're starting renovations next month." My aunt raised her eyebrows. "Well, good for him. Hope it turns out better than most of those handshake ventures." The room buzzed with low laughter, and someone changed the subject. I sat through dessert thinking about Eli, about how he'd worked weekends for 6 months to help fund that property, about the spreadsheet he kept open on his laptop with estimates, permits, and projected ROI, about the nights he stayed up late researching zoning laws because no one else on the team wanted to deal with City Hall. When I got home, Eli was in the kitchen, barefoot, making tea. "How was it?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I just walked over, wrapped my arms around him, and rested my head against his back. "They still don't see you," I said quietly. "They still don't get it." He nodded. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Not really. And eventually, something would give. My father turned 60 that year. To celebrate, my parents rented a house in the Catskills for the weekend. Big place, all wood and stone, vaulted ceilings, and wraparound decks. They sent out evites and group texts, booked catering for Saturday night, and coordinated travel for the out-of-town relatives. It was the kind of family event they loved, curated, polished, and just far enough from real life to feel exclusive. Eli and I were invited, technically. The message came through my sister. "Mom said to tell you you're welcome to come, and to bring Eli if you want." Not exactly a warm invitation, but I said yes. We'd been together for a little over a year at that point. Things were serious. He'd met my friends, stayed over on holidays, fixed my leaky bathroom faucet, and painted my living room with me on a rainy Saturday. We lived in separate apartments, but it didn't feel like two lives. It felt like one. Still, I almost told him not to come. Not because I didn't want him there, but because I didn't want him to go through it again. The sidelong glances, the quiet disapproval. But he said he was up for it. Let them think whatever they want, he said. I'm not going there for them, I'm going for you. We arrived late Saturday afternoon, just as everyone was changing out of hiking clothes and prepping for dinner. The driveway was full, cars with luxury badges, fresh washes, and tinted windows. I parked at the end near the trees, next to a gravel slope that didn't look entirely stable. Eli carried the wine and a pie I'd picked up from a bakery on the way. I had asked him to wear something a little dressier, button-down shirt, leather shoes. He'd even trimmed his beard. We walked in through the side entrance, past a cluster of kids playing video games in the den. No one greeted us. I spotted my Uncle Alan first. He turned from the kitchen island when we walked in and froze, eyes scanning Eli. Then he smiled without warmth. You brought him? He said, loud enough for 3 other people to hear. Someone in the living room muttered, Guess she really is the black sheep. I felt my stomach clench. Eli didn't react. He set the pie gently on the counter and handed the wine to my aunt, who took it like it was a regifted candle. No thank you, no eye contact. We stayed in the kitchen for a bit, making small talk with my cousin Mia, who was always polite if a little distracted. My parents were upstairs getting dressed, so we waited. When they came down, my mom hugged me without really hugging me. My dad gave Eli a single nod and said, Hey there, champ. He didn't make eye contact either. Dinner was set up on the patio, one long table under string lights. My mom had arranged seating cards, which felt like overkill for a family event, but nothing she did surprised me anymore. Eli and I were placed at the far end of the table, next to my second cousins, and across from my brother's college roommate, who'd apparently been invited as an honorary nephew. I tried not to care. I poured Eli a glass of wine and smiled at him. He squeezed my knee under the table. The joke started during the first course. One of my uncles made a crack about people who work with their hands and how they probably shouldn't shake before meals. Someone else added something about how manual labor is noble until you have to marry it. Everyone laughed. Eli didn't say anything. He just looked down at his plate. I wanted to disappear. Halfway through the main course, my mom asked him, So Eli, are you still doing construction? She said it like she wasn't quite sure if that was the word he preferred, or just the best euphemism available. I'm a general contractor, he said. I also co-own a small firm. We're renovating multifamily properties right now. Oh, she said, blinking. Well, I guess there's always a need for affordable housing. There was a silence after that. My dad cleared his throat. My sister refilled her wine glass and whispered something to her fiancé, who chuckled. I could feel my face heating up. Then came the moment I still replay. Eli reached for the breadbasket. My mom, looking straight at him, said, Did you wash your hands after whatever work you do? It was said lightly, teasingly almost, but there was nothing light about it. Eli's hand froze mid-air. He looked at me. Not angry, not embarrassed, just tired, bone-tired. And in that second, I knew we wouldn't make it through dessert. We stayed for 20 more minutes, enough to make it seem like we weren't storming out, just leaving a little early. I told my parents Eli had an early job site visit in the morning. No one asked where. No one asked what kind. In the car, we didn't speak for a while. Finally, Eli said, It's not that they don't like me, it's that they don't see me as real. I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. He went on. They think I'm temporary, like I don't count, like the longer I stick around, the more it reflects badly on you. I stared out the window at the passing trees. I know. I'm not angry, he said. Just sad, for you, that they make you feel like this. I looked at him then, at the man who had driven 2 hours with me to be humiliated in a stranger's vacation house. The man who had done nothing but show up and be kind and helpful and still wasn't enough. Not for them. And not once had he made me feel like I wasn't enough. I opened my mouth to apologize, but he stopped me. Don't, he said. You didn't do this. They did. When we got back to my place, I poured 2 glasses of water and sat down on the couch. Eli changed into sweats and joined me, resting his arm across the back cushion, not quite touching me. They laughed when I walked in, he said. It's not even subtle anymore. I nodded. I don't think it ever was. He didn't say anything after that. Neither did I. But something shifted that night. The air between us thickened, not with resentment, but with finality. The betrayal wasn't just that they mocked him, it was that they did it with confidence, with ease, like they were performing a family ritual they'd long rehearsed. One where I brought someone they deemed unworthy, and they circled the wagons to keep the bloodline intact. And I let it happen. Again. But that was the last time. That night, after we got back to my apartment, I cried harder than I had in years. Not in that quiet, composed way I'd learned to manage since childhood, but the kind of crying that leaves you gasping for air, eyes swollen, nose running, shoulders shaking so hard you can't sit still. Eli sat beside me on the couch, not saying anything, just holding my hand. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't offer platitudes or tell me to breathe. He just let it happen. At some point I managed to say, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made you come. I knew it was going to be like that. You don't have to explain, he said. His voice was steady. I see it now. I wiped my face on the sleeve of my sweatshirt and nodded. We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, just spent. Later when we went to bed, he held me like I was something fragile. And maybe I was. Not because of what they said that night, but because I had spent my whole life hoping, naively, that they might someday choose to see me for who I actually was. And now I knew they wouldn't. The next morning, I called my mom. She picked up on the third ring, her tone bright like she didn't know what was coming. Hey, sweetheart. Did you make it home okay? I didn't ease into it. I told her the truth plainly. That they had been cruel. That the things people said, things they laughed about, were unacceptable. That I wouldn't be coming around for a while. She went quiet for a moment. Then she gave a soft, forced chuckle. Oh, honey, don't be so sensitive. You know how your uncle is. He jokes like that with everyone. I told her it wasn't just my uncle. I mentioned her own comment, the one about Eli washing his hands. There was a pause. Then she said, Well, it was just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it. You didn't have to mean anything by it, I said. It landed all the same. You're overreacting, she said finally, her voice clipped. We've always welcomed the people you've brought around, but we're allowed to have opinions. That's what families do. They tell each other the truth. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how far from the truth that statement was. My family never told the truth. We told stories. Ones that made us look good, feel superior, stay in control. The truth was messy, and in our house, messy meant weak. I hung up without saying goodbye. No one followed up. No texts from my dad. No calls from my sister. My brother didn't check in, didn't ask how we were doing after that dinner. It was like the whole thing had been erased from their memories, written off as another Natalie drama. Overreaction. Emotional outburst. Classic me. The silence didn't feel like a break. It felt like a verdict. For the first time in a long time, I let myself sit with the full weight of what it meant. That the people I was raised to believe would always be there for me, regardless of circumstance, success, or failure, actually had a narrow set of terms. Unspoken, but rigid. You belonged if you played the part. If you made choices that made them comfortable. If you mirrored their values back to them in the right light. And if you didn't, you were tolerated. Until you made them look bad, then you were excluded. I started thinking about how much of my life had been shaped by that framework. The babysitting, the homework help, the straight-A report cards, the early internships. I had poured myself into achievement, not because I loved success, but because I believed it was the only currency they would accept. Love wasn't given freely in our house. It was negotiated, earned, traded. When I brought Eli into the picture, I'd assumed that maybe, after everything, I had built enough of a balance to offer him a seat at the table. But love doesn't work that way. You can't deposit it in advance. I kept playing that night over in my mind. The way the jokes kept coming. The look on Eli's face when my mom questioned his hygiene like he was a child coming in from recess. The way they all laughed, not in surprise, but in habit. Like they had done it before. Like this wasn't the first time they'd sized him up and found him lacking. I also started to notice something else. That in all the time I had spent defending Eli to them, I had never once had to defend myself to him. He had never questioned my ambition, my choices, or my worth. He didn't care that I wasn't climbing a corporate ladder. He didn't treat my nonprofit work like a detour. He didn't ask for credentials. He just showed up. And I had failed to protect him from the people who needed credentials for everything. One night, maybe a week later, we were eating takeout on the couch, watching a rerun of something we'd seen a dozen times. Eli turned to me and asked, "Do you want to go to your cousin's engagement party?" It was the next family event on the calendar. My mom had emailed an invitation. I hadn't responded. "No," I said. "Not really." "Then don't," he said. "You don't owe them attendance." I know, but I said it like someone trying to believe it. I think that's when something inside me started to shift. Slowly. Not a dramatic break. Just a quiet uncoupling from the belief that family always had to come first. That showing up was the same as being valued. That loyalty meant enduring humiliation just to keep the peace. Peace doesn't mean silence. It means safety. And I hadn't felt safe with my family in a long time. So I stopped returning their calls. I declined invitations. I skipped birthdays. I let my absence speak for itself. And in the space that opened up, I started noticing how light things felt. I didn't realize how much energy I had spent preparing for judgment. How much time I lost worrying about how to explain Eli to people who didn't care enough to ask real questions. One night, I told him, "I think I've spent most of my life trying to be palatable to people who would never like me anyway." He nodded, chewing slowly. "That's exhausting." "It is. You don't have to do it anymore." "I know." And this time, I meant it. 3 months passed without a word from my parents. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, it was like standing in an empty hallway, waiting for footsteps that never came. Eventually, I stopped waiting. In that time, Eli and his business partners finalized their first major deal. 6 properties, mixed use, mostly residential, all in a part of the city that was just beginning to turn the corner. It was the culmination of a year of long nights, careful spreadsheets, and more than a few high-stress meetings. I watched Eli carry the weight of it day by day, never once dropping his focus, never once letting pressure make him mean. When the contracts were signed and the money transferred, he stood in our kitchen holding the signed documents like they were made of glass. "We did it," he said. Not like a boast, but like a quiet exhale. That weekend, he brought up something he hadn't mentioned in months. "I want us to buy a place," he said. "Not just for now. Something that's ours." I looked at him across the table. "You sure you're ready for that?" He smiled. "I've been ready." We started looking. Nothing extravagant, just something that felt open, stable, real. We toured places in every neighborhood we could afford. Condos that felt like hotel rooms, townhouses with too many stairs, fixer-uppers we didn't have the energy for. Then, one afternoon, I came across a listing that stopped me cold. It was in the neighborhood where I grew up, 10 blocks from my parents' house, same zip code. 4 bedrooms, tall windows, soft light, a wraparound porch like something out of a photo I used to cut from magazines. I clicked through the pictures 3 times before I showed Eli. "You sure?" he asked. Not in a skeptical way, just careful. "I'm sure." We went to the open house that Saturday. It was one of those realtor events with little pastries and soft jazz playing through Bluetooth speakers. We walked through the front door and I knew. Not because it was perfect, but because it was right. The floors were worn in a way that felt lived in. The walls had been painted too many times. There was a tiny mark above one door frame where someone had measured a child's height in pencil. I was standing in the dining room, picturing us having dinner with friends, when I heard my name. Natalie. I turned. My mother was standing by the fireplace, holding a tiny plate of fruit and cheese cubes. She was wearing the same layered gold necklaces she always wore when she wanted to look casual but expensive. I blinked once, trying to process what she was doing there. Hi, I said. Didn't know you were looking around here, she said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I didn't know you were friends with the seller, I said. She shrugged. Marcia and I are on the same advisory board. Small world. Eli came in from the kitchen, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. She didn't acknowledge him at first. Then, as if it were required by etiquette, she gave a small nod. Eli, she said. Hi, he said evenly. She glanced around. Nice house. Probably a bit out of your price range though, isn't it? The words hit like a casual backhand. No malice, just the same subtle, practiced condescension I'd grown up decoding. A reminder that she still didn't see him as someone who belonged in a room like this. Eli didn't answer. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he took out his phone, walked back into the kitchen, and made a call. I didn't know what he was doing at first. I just watched him lean against the counter, one hand in his pocket, voice low and firm. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When he came back, he took my hand. We're done here, he said. I followed him out the front door, past the flower beds and the sign that read Open House, past the lineup of people still waiting to tour the place. When we got in the car, I turned to him. What did you just do? I called the seller, he said. Made a full cash offer. Told him we can close in 2 weeks. I blinked. Are you serious? They were already planning to accept offers this weekend, he said. I just saved them time. The house went off the market the next morning. The offer was accepted without counter. No one called to congratulate us. No one said, "We're happy for you," or asked if we needed help packing. But word got around. My brother texted me a week later. He really paid cash for that place? I didn't respond. A cousin DM'd me on Instagram. Wait, is that your new house? It's beautiful. No message from my mom. No message from my dad. Just silence. But I knew they knew. I imagined them driving past it on their way to dinner, catching a glimpse of Eli's truck in the driveway. I imagined my mother explaining it away at brunch, saying something vague like, they got lucky with some investment, or it's a starter place. They'd never say it outright, but something about this broke their narrative. The one where I was reckless, impractical, led by emotion. The one where Eli was a mistake I'd grow out of. There was no growing out of this. This was real. Ours. Bought without their approval, their money, or their validation. And maybe that was the part they couldn't forgive. My parents never acknowledged the purchase. Not a call, not a card, not even a thinly veiled, "So I hear you found a place." But I knew the message had landed. A house 10 blocks from theirs, bought outright, no mortgage, no cosigners, no help from anyone. It wasn't about the money, it was about the shift in narrative, the one they'd clung to for years. That I was drifting. Naive. Making impulsive choices they would eventually have to rescue me from. We didn't throw a housewarming party. We didn't put anything on social media. There was no need to announce anything. We just moved in and started living. The house needed work, but nothing urgent. Eli replaced the light fixtures in the hallway the first weekend. I patched a crack in the bathroom tile. We bought a dining table secondhand and sanded it together in the garage over the course of 2 weekends, both of us wearing dust masks and old hoodies. Slowly, the place started to feel like ours. Not a project. Not a flex. Just a home. The neighbors were the first to catch on. A few stopped by in the first week with welcome cookies and questions. Most assumed Eli was the contractor hired to do renovations. When I corrected them, "We actually live here," there was always a pause. Not hostile, just surprised. Like we didn't quite match the profile of the previous owners or their usual social circle. One older couple down the street, the Simmonses, seemed genuinely pleased. They invited us for coffee one Sunday and asked real questions about our work, how we met, what we liked about the neighborhood. At one point, Mr. Simmons said, there was talk that Marcia was holding out for an investor. Didn't realize it went to someone local." Eli just smiled and said, "We're glad it did." A few weeks later, one of my cousins showed up. No warning, just a knock at the door on a Saturday afternoon. She stood on the porch holding an iced coffee and a kind of nervous curiosity. "Hey," she said. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by." I let her in. She walked through the rooms slowly, touching surfaces like she was appraising them. "It's bigger than I expected," she said. "You really bought this?" Eli was in the backyard fixing the gate latch. I could see him through the window. She peered toward him. "So, did he come into money or something?" I didn't answer. I didn't owe her an explanation. That was the part they never seemed to grasp, that not everything needed to be justified, especially not to people who only showed up when they needed to recalibrate their assumptions. After she left, Eli came in and washed his hands at the kitchen sink. "Was that someone I'm supposed to remember?" he asked. "Not really." He nodded and moved on. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't showing up out of obligation. I wasn't organizing birthday dinners, sending group texts about holiday plans, smoothing over arguments between my siblings. I had always been the one to keep things moving, the unspoken coordinator, the emotional buffer. Now I was just gone. And things shifted. My sister texted a month later asking if I was mad at everyone. I didn't answer right away. Eventually, I just said, I needed space. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I heard through a coworker, whose son went to school with my cousin's daughter, that the annual fall gathering was a mess. No one knew who was bringing what. My mom ended up forgetting dessert entirely and blamed the mix-up on poor communication. I smiled when I heard that, not out of spite, just relief. They were capable of dysfunction, even without me there to hold the reins. I realized how much of my life I'd spent preempting their needs, remembering birthdays, sending thank you notes on behalf of other people, calming my dad down when my brother said something careless, reframing my mom's criticisms so my sister wouldn't spiral. I had convinced myself it was kindness, but really it was survival. If I stayed useful, I couldn't be discarded. Now, I wasn't useful, I was just gone. And the world didn't end. My mom emailed once, just a subject line that said, checking in. The body was blank. I didn't reply. We spent the winter working on the house. Eli built shelves in the office. I learned how to caulk baseboards. We hosted a couple of dinners, not big events, just close friends who brought wine and took off their shoes at the door. People who knew the full story and never once questioned whether we belonged in the house we'd built for ourselves. Sometimes I'd catch Eli standing in the kitchen, looking out the window like he was trying to remember something. I'd ask what he was thinking, and he'd say, nothing. But I knew. He was still carrying some of it too. That night at my dad's birthday, the way they looked at him, the way they laughed. We never talked about it much after that, not because we were avoiding it, but because it didn't need revisiting. The people who had tried to define us no longer had access. Their opinions were echoes we didn't have to answer to anymore. Once, in early spring, we ran into my dad at the hardware store. It was brief. He nodded at Eli, said, "Hey there," and walked past us toward the paint aisle. I watched his back as he disappeared down the row. He didn't stop to talk, didn't ask how we were or congratulate us, just kept walking. Afterward, Eli said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Actually, I am." That was the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even disappointed. I was just done. And in that space, something else started to grow. A kind of quiet pride. Not loud, not defiant, just solid. We had built a life that didn't need defending. Not everyone gets to say that. It was nearly a year after we moved in, when my dad showed up at our door. It was a Sunday afternoon. Eli was out back staining the porch railing, and I was inside, sorting through a box of winter clothes I hadn't touched since college. I heard a knock, just two quiet raps, and figured it was a neighbor. When I opened the door, I froze. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just smaller. He didn't have the same posture he usually wore at work events or holiday parties. No straight back, no practiced smile. Just hands in his coat pockets and something uncertain in his eyes. He didn't say hello right away. Just pulled something from inside his jacket. A photo, a little creased at the edges. It was me, probably 6 years old, sitting on the back steps of our old house in a mismatched outfit, hair tangled, knees scraped, holding a toy hammer like it was something important. He held it out. "I found this when we were clearing out a drawer," he said. "Your mom had kept it." I took the photo, glanced at it, and looked back at him. He was watching my face like it might give him instructions. "I think," he said, "we owe you both an apology." There was no build-up, no speech. Just those words, said plainly. I stepped back and opened the door a little wider. "You want to come in?" He nodded and followed me inside. I led him to the living room. Eli came in from the back just as we were sitting down. He paused for half a second when he saw my dad, then gave a polite nod. My dad stood up. "Eli." "Hey," Eli said. They shook hands, brief, firm, and without ceremony. No one commented on it. Eli sat beside me on the couch, and for a few seconds, the room was quiet. My dad looked around. "You've done a lot with the place." "Thanks," I said. He hesitated again, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't know how to say this in a way that fixes anything, and I don't expect it to, but I wanted to say it anyway. I waited. "We were wrong," he said. "About you. About him. About a lot of things." Eli didn't move. He didn't speak, just listened. My dad went on. "I think we got so used to measuring people by a certain standard, school, job titles, who you know, that we forgot that most of that doesn't mean much when it comes to character." He glanced at Eli, then back at me. "I don't expect either of you to forgive us, but I wanted to say it. It wasn't a speech, it wasn't rehearsed, and it wasn't complete." He didn't mention the jokes, or the dismissiveness, or the way they'd treated Eli like a mistake I hadn't yet corrected. But he had shown up, alone, without defense, without blame. That counted for something. We didn't hug. He didn't stay long. Maybe 20 minutes, enough time to ask if the water pressure had been a problem in the upstairs bathroom. He used to do plumbing repairs in his early 20s, and tell us he liked the way we'd arranged the living room. When he left, I walked him to the door. He didn't promise to call. I didn't ask him to. We stood on the porch for a moment, and then he said, "Your mom doesn't know I came." I nodded. I figured. She's still catching up. That was his way of saying, this won't happen again soon. After he drove off, Eli joined me on the porch. We sat on the steps, the same way we had after signing the offer papers, when the place had still felt too good to be real. "Did that feel like closure?" I asked. Eli shook his head. "No, but maybe the beginning of something different." We didn't talk about it again for a while. The visit came and went without follow-up. No text from my dad, no email from my mom. But 3 weeks later, she sent a card. No message inside, just a photo of a new baby cousin and a post-it with the words, "Thought you'd want to see." It was something. Not much, but something. A few months later, I invited them to stop by. Short visit. Coffee and muffins on a Sunday morning. I didn't clean excessively. I didn't prep talking points. Just opened the door when they knocked and let them into our space like guests, not judges. They were polite. My mom complimented the garden. My dad asked Eli about a pipe fitting in the basement. The conversation was light, but not forced. There were pauses, but no barbs. We didn't talk about careers. We didn't talk about money. We talked about the house, about the neighbors, about the weather. And when they left, I didn't feel like I had to lie down in a dark room to recover. I never went back to how things were. I didn't start managing family logistics again. I didn't reinsert myself into their holidays or group chats, but I allowed limited contact. On my terms, birthdays, short visits, a photo every now and then. And when they made comments that veered too close to the edge, like when my mom once asked if Eli had found something permanent yet, I didn't explain or argue. I just said, "We're doing fine," and moved on. Eli never held a grudge, but he never forgot either. He treated them with courtesy, never cold, never warm, just neutral, steady. Like someone who understood what had happened and didn't need to relive it. Neither did I. There were moments, quiet ones, where I caught myself grieving what could have been. A different version of family. One where showing up didn't mean bracing for impact. But I never mistook politeness for healing again. We weren't fixed, but we were functional. And that was enough. It's been 2 years. The house is ours, not just in name or paperwork, but in feel. Every light fixture was chosen by hand. Every scrape on the floor has a story. There's a dent in the back of the pantry door from when Eli dropped a toolbox while installing shelves. He still hasn't fixed it, and I don't ask him to. It's part of the place now, part of us. The business is doing well. Better than we expected, honestly. Eli and his partners took on 2 new properties last fall, run-down duplexes near the edge of the city, and turned them into solid rentals with wait lists. He still does walkthroughs in worn jeans and beat-up sneakers, still forgets to charge his phone or bring an umbrella when it rains, but he remembers everything else. Names, numbers, which tenants need extra time on rent because of a medical bill. He's steady like that, not flashy, just reliable. Sometimes I catch myself watching him from across a room, working, laughing, fixing something without being asked, and I think about how close I came to letting my family's discomfort dictate my future. How many times I softened the truth, or shrank myself just to avoid another joke at his expense. I still go quiet when I think about it, about how long it took to choose peace over approval, and how I kept asking for permission from people who didn't know how to give it. My family is there. We talk, occasionally. Holidays are smaller, quieter. I host sometimes, just a few people. There's less pressure to perform now. They come, they eat, they go. No more seating charts, no more dress codes disguised as traditions, just people in sweaters, holding mugs, trying not to say the wrong thing. It's not warm, but it's civil. My dad still visits sometimes. He brings odds and ends, an old wrench set, leftover drywall tape, like he's contributing in his own way. We don't talk about the past. Just the yard or the latest project Eli's working on. He doesn't apologize anymore. He doesn't need to. I heard what I needed to hear the day he showed up with that photo. My mom never talks about that weekend in the Catskills. I'm not sure she remembers it the way we do. She'll reference the house sometimes, mention how brave it was to buy something that size in this economy. I don't correct her, I just nod. Every once in a while, someone in the family will slip. A cousin will say something like, "You guys really made that place work, huh?" Or, "Eli actually knows what he's doing. Who would have thought?" They don't mean it as an insult, not anymore. They think they're being generous. And now and then, at a family gathering or over email, someone will ask if Eli has any advice on buying, on remodeling, on market trends. It's always framed casually, like they just happen to be curious. But it's a shift, a quiet pivot from judgment to respect. Funny how things turn. There's a photo on our hallway wall now, not the one my dad brought, a new one. Eli and I on the front steps, holding coffee mugs and wearing matching sweatshirts we didn't plan. The porch light is off. The sun's coming up behind us. We didn't stage it. A friend took it on a random morning before brunch. I didn't love it at first. My hair's a mess. Eli's looking away. But over time, it's become my favorite. Because it's just us. No armor, no performance. Sometimes, I think about who I used to be. The girl who cleaned up everyone's messes, who worked holidays, answered group texts, played mediator when things got tense. The one who said it's fine even when it wasn't. I don't miss her, but I understand why she existed. She thought love came with conditions. That if you were good enough, accommodating enough, you'd earn a seat at the table. That peace meant keeping things smooth, even if it cost you your voice. But now, I know better. Peace isn't passive, it's a choice. A decision you make over and over. Not to be louder, or tougher, or meaner, but to stop shrinking around people who need you small. That's the legacy I want. Not revenge, not vindication. Just space. Room to breathe. Room to build. Room to love someone without defending it. They left when I brought him home. Called it a phase. Said I was settling. Now they ask for his opinion, his insight, his time, and he gives it. Kindly, sparingly. He doesn't need their approval either, but he never let their dismissal define him. That's the part I'm proudest of. Not the house, not the money, not even the distance I've finally put between me and the people who made me doubt myself, but the life we built when no one thought we could, and how quietly it proved them wrong. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had to walk away from people you thought would always be in your corner, how did you know it was time? Have you ever been judged for who you chose to love, or stood up for someone everyone else dismissed? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if you're learning to choose peace over approval, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. More stories coming soon.